you start to run into all sorts of problems. You start to run into population decline at the extreme end of it. Before you get that far, a lot of countries are actually there right now. Before you get that far, I mean, you have general societal decay, crime and that sort of thing. So, but yeah, then you progress along the spectrum, and you get to population decline, and that brings a whole host of problems for.
Isn't that more of a culture thing? And Fishy, I heard you groan.
I'm culture, man.
Isn't this more of a culture thing, not necessarily a government thing?
I would like to hope that we can handle that sort of thing culturally rather than legislatively. And it bothers me that the government has so many compelling interests that now they can compel you under, the way that Obamacare is running. They're going to eventually compel you to eat certain things, exercise a certain number of times. People say that's outlandish, in the same way that one would say, 50 years ago that gay marriage would be outlandish or something. But it's happening. The government is taking this all, this all-inclusive, we have to promote X, Y, Z, whatever, in order to further the interests of society and whatever. I don't want the government deciding what's good for me in really almost any situation. So using that kind of, the government has an interest, so let's allow it to do it, that's where I get off that train really fast.
Yeah, I'd like to, if an institution or a social contract is so essential to society or a social order, why in the heck would anybody want to entrust it to government to protect?
Well, and look at how we used to handle things. If you had somebody a little freaky in your family or a little different, people either didn't talk about it or that person went somewhere where they wouldn't embarrass the family. We used to all know each other in our neighborhoods, and we were not very mobile as a society. And so those kind of close-knit societies took care of everything from the little odd to the extremely aberrant behavior. The problem that we have now is sort of the aberrations and the differences are now reality shows, and that's the culture that we live in. And people don't know their neighbors, and some people would argue that they don't want to know their neighbors. But we are mobile. The car has ruined us for making those small, close-knit communities anymore because people are moving every 7 years or whatever.
I do want to say this as I cut in for a second. I don't want this just to turn into a beat up on Neil because I do think that and I don't think it is, and I don't think the folks we have here will do that.
Let me throw Neil a little bone here. And before that, I want to insert my own personal disclaimer here that what I'm about to say does not reflect the official opinion of any organization that I am a member of or maybe an officer of, which any such hypothetical organization shall remain off the record. But I personally am an evangelical Christian. I was involved in a very, very public, in national news, denominational split over sexuality and biblical authority, and was on the Orthodox Christianity side of that argument. That being said, I cannot look at our Constitution and see anywhere where the federal government has the right to insert itself into those arguments. And it's not a role that the federal government was ever intended to have. And just recently we had the I don't know if you guys saw the Brian J. Fisher video clip that was out about a week ago, I think, where he made the claim that the First Amendment religious protection only applies to Christianity because it was by far the 99.99% dominant religion when the First Amendment was written. And that's just so incredibly...
Tell Patrick Henry that.
Well, then I tweeted at him and, of course, didn't get a response. I didn't expect to. But how about the no religious test clause of Article 6, I think it is, that predates the First Amendment. So if the Constitution only encompasses Christianity, then does the no religious test clause only apply to establishing Christian tests, which does then that mean by extension of your own idiotic logic, Mr. Fisher, that we can establish a Muslim test for people who are going to be officials of the United States? And of course the answer to that is no.
Well, I will say that, and this is just me kind of riffing here, but we haven't established an official test for certain minority sensibilities, say Islamic sensibilities or gay sensibilities, but we've established unofficial tests for those. There are certain things that I feel uncomfortable saying in public because I know I'm going to face, in some cases, some pretty nasty backlash for it, despite the fact that I have every right to say it and that I'm not really going after anybody and asking to take away anybody's rights as far as I'm concerned. There is that unofficial social stigma that is being attached to it. It's sort of a reversal in many ways. I think that's an interesting aspect to it.
But is anybody from... And I guess this is the question that needs to be asked. Is anybody from the government coming up and saying, Neil Dewing, how dare you say that? How dare you be involved in that? We need to boycott you. We need to boycott the website you're on. We need to boycott... Is anybody... Your Twitter account, is anybody from the government saying that?
Not here, not yet. In Canada, they are.
Well, tell the Canadians that they can go...
Yeah, well, obviously, it's Canada, but I mean,
Canada is also interesting in that they have an established church too.
Well, which is more of a source of cultural cohesion than any actual religious sentiment. You talk to people from England and they say they're C of E. They go to church on Christmas and Easter maybe, and it's just really a chance to catch up.
Neil, your boss at Pocketful of Liberty just weighed in. I boycott Neil all the time.
He does. He's terrible.
Love you, Jay.
He throws me to the libertarian lions, and then he just laughs. He enjoys it. He gets off on it.
Well, clearly there is a very much politically correct movement that tries to silence speech. There's the case right now in, where is it out west? In fact, I think it may even be in Utah, of the baker who's being ordered to provide New Mexico, thank you, who's being ordered to provide a wedding cake. Frankly, forcing somebody to produce something is just as bad as forcing somebody to buy, as in health insurance.
But look at the opportunity we have with that. That's where people on the right, people in the middle, people on the left even that are really sensible, the few that there happen to be, can stand and say, do you really care about liberty? Do you really care about your freedom and your personal ability to make whatever decisions you like? Can you... most people can. Can you get behind the idea that a person should be able to transact business with whom or not transact business with whom they like? That gives us the advantage, having a case like that we can point out, and gives us the ability to say more speech, not less. You want those people that are offensive to you to say things so you can identify them. You can use that argument as well.
And in the case of the cake maker and everything else, it's the case that markets will work. If there's enough in the community who are outraged by his decision not to sell a cake to gay wedding couple, then you know what? He won't be selling enough cakes to stay in business. And then maybe if he wants to stay in business and have that policy, he needs to relocate to some place that is more accepting of his beliefs. And, that's what, the states founded the federal government, not the other way around. Our society, our government is not the society. Our government, the relationship has been flipped around since what was intended. And, it's an open question, I think, whether we can ever get it back to the way it's supposed to be, where, as we brought up,
another show completely.
A community, excuse me, a community caring about each other and maintaining its own standards. And, that comes to are you talking to your neighbor about things that you've observed about, hey, I didn't like the fact that you didn't cut your grass, or whatever sort of issue you want to bring up, but sort of that, community standard. We've ceded so much of our individual sovereignty and our community sovereignty to government, and it really doesn't matter what level you've ceded it at. It really, we've lost so much.
I think too, the market really does. I mean, I'm not making a parallel, but I'm making a parallel. In those lunch counter sit-ins, those were economic pressures put on businesses to desegregate, and that worked. That was an element of the civil rights movement. That said, the market fixes a lot of these problems, and as you said, go to the market where your particular beliefs are supported, and you have that ability. It might be a little bit difficult to do, but the market takes care of those things far more effectively and efficiently. And the marketplace of ideas, by advertising people's views, does the same thing.
Let me ask you something. Let me ask a question for all of y'all. How many of y'all, whether you agree with the judge's decision or not, how many of y'all are happy that a federal judge made this decision? Fishy?
Not hardly.
Alan?
I do not see any federal standing in this issue whatsoever.
Neil?
No, I'm not pleased.
Yeah, I think it's ridiculous. I think it is ridiculous that a federal judge has to even be involved in this. Now, we all agree on that, so we agree on that. There's a good thing. The question that I want to spend the next 15 minutes or so discussing, and if y'all were hoping we talk Snowden, we're not going to. Maybe I'll invite everybody back next week and we'll do this. Well, next week's Christmas Eve. We'll figure out something.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's not happening. Maybe we'll toss it on another day or something like that. But since we're all here, what's the solution? How can the four of us, how can we come up with a solution to this problem? Neil?
I do not believe that we can. I'm actually extremely pessimistic that our country will be able to come up with a solution to this, that the conservative movement will be able to come up with a solution to this. I was saying in the chat that I'm almost Knockian in my pessimism. I think sometimes we're just speaking to the remnant, and that's where I am. So I may not be the best person to ask that.
Alan?
Well, I will. Unfortunately, what everybody seems to get hung up on is we have to come up with a fix, and we have to come up with it right now, and everything is going to hinge on absolutely the next election. And if we don't win everything in the next election and change everything right away, then everything is lost. Well, I've said things like that too, but I can also take a realistic view that, it took us the better part of a century or more to descend to this level. It's probably going to be a multi-generational task to get us back. And really, I also want to give a little bit of shout out here to Jay Caruso, who's in the chat and I'm sure is listening, because I've got a half finished piece in the Pocketful of Liberty queue, which I will promise to finish writing here as I have time.